Son, I gotta do better than this.
Lights out.
Sacking the cornerback is just like you devastate a city, or you cream a multitude of people. I mean, it's just like you put all the offensive players in one bag, and I just take a baseball bat and beat on the bag. So each time he came over there, I tried to tear his damn head off.
Let's play some football. Let's play some football.
The pressure is on. This is Off the Edge on Tide 100.9.
Focus on what you want to do, what you want to accomplish. Think about that. Don't think about how you feel, how tired you are, how hot it is. You got to push yourself on the field like when you're playing football.
It's my honor to present the National Championship Trophy to Coach Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide.
To me, this is the ultimate team. All these guys bought into everything they needed to do to be the best players that they could be. There's more togetherness on this team than almost any team that we've ever had. And they had to overcome and persevere so much adversity through this season, and they've done it magnificently. And I'm so proud of this for what they've been able to accomplish and going undefeated and winning the national championship.
Streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and the Tide 100.9 app. Here is your host of Off the Edge, Jacob Harrison.
Your man overthrown. Spit out the ball.
Hello there. Good morning. Welcome in to Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports. Jacob Harrison here with you. Michael Bronner across the glass. Tommy Paradise helping him out. Good, safe travels for Joe Gaither as he goes to check out his Chicago Bears this weekend. Leaving us maniacs in charge. What is up with that? That's terrifying. But we'll make it through. We'll get you through the bye weekend. Want to discuss officiating here in a little bit. And in about 12 minutes, we'll talk with my good friend Joey Blackwell of Bama Central, get his thoughts on what the Crimson Tide needs to work on during the bye week and what kind of things, maybe that we're overreacting about. Get his thoughts on Mark Ingram rejoining the Saints as well. You can read about Mark Ingram, his journey through the NFL. He's had a great NFL career. Certainly, probably not a Hall of Fame career, but it's still something very, very interesting to watch unfold. And now that he's back with the Saints, he has an opportunity to become their all-time leading rusher. He's just 89 yards away from surpassing Deuce McAllister in that regard. Now, Alvin Kamara will probably take that away from him in due time too, but nonetheless, good for Mark to, etch his name in Saints lore. He's been an incredible player for them and for the Ravens. Things didn't work out with the Texans, but maybe he'll see a little bit of a revival here with New Orleans. Of course, before we get truly started, the show as always streams live on the Tide 100.9 app, which you can download it on Apple or Android devices. And it's your best friend as a Crimson Tide fan. It gives you all of the latest news, all of the latest opinions and conjecture. And also, you can enjoy all of our live content on the radio as well, right there with the Tide 100.9 app, as well as on Tide109.com. All of that same stuff is available too. You can also find this show on all the streaming platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter as well. Everything at Off the Edge 109, shared through at Tide 109 as well. Alabama Vintage, of course, always sponsors the show at Alabama VTG on the Instagram account. Tommy, surprisingly, not wearing Alabama Vintage apparel at the moment, unless that's where he got that sweet jacket from.
I'm just going to outright say that I did visit Alabama Vintage on Monday. We went to Taco Mama. I got an Atlanta Braves spring training hat and a Bill Elliott Batman hat for NASCAR. So
there you
I've
go.
Been to Alabama Vintage. Don't worry. I got you covered.
There's always something good to find there. Bill Elliott Batman hat. I mean, the NASCAR products are off the chain there as well. And hey, after you visit them, I mean, I'm not sponsored by Taco Mama, but Taco Mama's great. So, I mean, it's right there. You can enjoy it all. It's Alabama Vintage, 2210 University Boulevard, across from City Hall in the heart of downtown T-Town. memorabilia, clothing options, whether it's Alabama, whether it's professional jerseys, whether it's the great hat wall or the shoes, it's all there for you. Check them out on Instagram at Alabama VTG. Get an impression of what their stock is like, and also hold the new items for yourself as well. It's an ever revolving stock, and Charlie does a lot of business, man. So you got to get yourself involved. And listen, as far as those jerseys go, you can find Alabama jerseys, you can find Alabama professional jerseys, and just iconic players of all time. I mean, one of my favorite purchases I've ever gotten from Alabama Vintage is a Lynn Swann jersey. Lynn Swann ain't got nothing to do with Alabama, but it's a vintage and it's stitched and it was incredible. It was $60, man. $60 for an incredible jersey like that. You really can't beat it. You really can't find it anywhere else but Alabama Vintage. Go check them out. So what I want to get into a little bit here at the start before we talk with Joey for the next 6 or 7 minutes is the SEC officiating has been a big deal for a lot of people. Now, I don't like to get all bent out of shape about officiating. I think that if your first inclination is to whine and moan about the officials, then you don't know what you're watching on the field. Oftentimes, players can do things to, cause a flag. It's a shocking concept, I know, but sometimes players break the rules, or they come close to breaking the rules, and officials have to make a decision on whether or not to throw a flag. Now, for all that being said, I fully agree that there is a problem with officiating in college football. It's not just the SEC. Y'all ever watched a Big Ten game? It's horrendous. Y'all ever watched a Pac-12 game? It ain't no better. Officiating across the board is bad. And if you want to blame anybody, don't blame Greg Sankey. Stop. Greg Sankey is an incredible commissioner of the SEC. Stop. It's not his fault. This stems from the NCAA not being a organized organization. At the end of the day, the fact that it falls on each separate conference to be able to figure out what they want to do with their officials, that makes things worse. And the fact that you think that you need to have in non-conference or in non-conference games to have officials from other conferences to officiate those games just so that there's no bias. See how dumb that is? There's not AFC and NFC officials in the NFL. There's just officials under the NFL umbrella. Now, the NFL's got its own officiating problems too, and a lot of those stem from just bad rules in general. But their guys aren't full-time either. Those dudes are lawyers and whatnot in the offseason. So there is no perfect solution, and that's just what Greg Sankey said on the SEC Network a couple of days ago. Listen to what Greg Sankey had to say about his officiating situation.
And when I look at the dedication of our officials, and I'll speak to other collegiate conferences, the amount of time they dedicate to their craft is substantial. And if you take an individual and simply make them full-time, does that really solve the dynamics of the game? So if we take a step back from the emotion, and Wednesday is probably a good day to do that, things are happening so fast on a football field, and particularly when we see sped up offenses, which is just a reality that we have to encounter in college football. That makes decision-making even more demanding. It has to happen more quickly. The evaluation points are still the same, just in a compressed period of time. So we have to adjust to that. Having full-time employees doesn't solve those realities.
And Greg's exactly right. It doesn't. Now, first of all, I want you to think about the fact that you want these guys to be full-time. What are they supposed to do for 8 months out of the year? Now, I mean, hone their craft. I mean, it's really not that feasible. Now, I will agree there is something that needs to be fixed, but Greg's got an excellent point too. The game is faster than it's ever been, except for maybe that period between 2010 and 2015 where like every group of 5 school wanted to do a hurry up offense because they were at such an athletic disadvantage. But it's hard. It's incredibly hard. Like, armchair quarterbacks don't know the difference between pass interference and holding, and yet you're asking these guys on the field that don't have the bird's eye view that you have to make that discrepancy in real time. It's difficult. It's hard. So I'm apologetic to officials while understanding there is a problem that needs to be solved. But anybody that thinks they've got the answer to the problem, they're fooling themselves, because there is no just one quick, easy solution. Full-time refs, while it could be a process in helping fix the situation, it's not it's not the Band-Aid that folks think it is. You got to put Neosporin under the Band-Aid for it to work. So you got to figure out what that other, aspect, that other ingredient to healing the situation is. And I can't tell you what it is. I don't know what it is. First of all, I just don't like the rules in football for the most part to begin with. I mean, we've got bad verbiage. A loss of down on intentional grounding, bro, you already lost the down. You didn't lose the next down. It's bad verbiage. You just don't get to redo the down like you do on 90% of offensive penalties. The only offensive penalty, in fact, that will hinder a drive at all, unless you intentionally ground the ball from 15 yards away, is personal fouls and holding. So the only ones. False starts don't hurt that bad. But on the defensive side of the ball, almost every single penalty results in an automatic first down for the offense. These are broken from the beginning. And so when you get the controversial ones, it leads to the referees end up deciding ball games in tight situations because of an infraction that benefits the offensive side of the ball too much. Or it's that holding call in a desperate situation. And the old cliche that there's holding on every play. There's no way to appease everybody with officiating. It's human error. And it doesn't matter which side you're pulling for. You're going to be pissed off about what that human error is, because it's going to negatively impact you at some point. But at the same time, we also have to understand there's not a lot of great coaching, and there's a lot of 18 to 22-year-olds that are out there on the football field playing incredibly fast. Nick Saban's football team was one of the most penalized teams through the first 6 games of the year. Now, the past couple of weeks, they've toned it down. You think that's because the officials just said, we're going to stop penalizing Alabama? No, it's because Alabama got better at avoiding the penalties that kept getting them in trouble. It's a double-edged sword, and it's a difficult one to sheath, honestly. And I don't know the solution. I don't. I'd like to see one. I'd like to see efforts be made and not just, PR malarkey from Greg Sankey, because, at the end of the day, a great commissioner is very good at PR malarkey. There does need to be efforts towards correcting the problem, but nobody's got a one-fix-all solution. It doesn't exist. It's a process. Hey, roll Tide. It's a process. We'll take a break. We'll talk with Joey Blackwell next here on Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports.
2016, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Bob participated in a clinical trial that included cutting-edge radiation therapy and surgery. He's been in remission since completion. I'm Keisha Sharp. Since losing my mother to pancreatic cancer, I've been working to share the kind of state-of-the-art work being done by Stand Up to Cancer and Lust Garden Foundation. To learn more about the latest research, including clinical trials, visit pancreaticcancercollective.org.
In a collision, easy decision. One name, one firm, one call. Ms. Reno.
I made that one call to Mesrano after being hit by an 18-wheeler. He got me $875,000.
I made that one call to Mesrano after being T-boned on McFarland. He got me $125,000.
I made that one call to Mesrano after my fender bender. He got me $50,000.
One name, one call, one firm. Mesrano.
No representations made that quality legal services to be performed is greater than quality legal services performed by other lawyers.
Don't miss a play at the Sportsbook at Pearl River Resort. Your front row seat to all the action. Place bets on all professional and most college sports at the counter, kiosk, or on your phone. Then catch the game on one of our 20 big screens from the comfort of the newly remodeled Timeout Lounge. Plus, the PRR Sports app gives you access to live, in-play sports betting. Sportsbook at Pearl River Resort. Be more than a fan. Be a player. Must be 21.
Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
Mostly cloudy, windy, noticeably cooler today. Some light rain at times this afternoon, the high at 65. Even colder tonight and tomorrow, mostly cloudy, periods of light rain. Tonight's low 48, the high tomorrow only in the middle 50s at 55. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 63 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
Follow Off the Edge on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for live streams and instant analysis. Off the Edge with Jacob Harrison continues.
Man, that was the best weather report I've heard from James Spann in about 8 months. Mid-60s, mid-50s. Let's go. It's 63 degrees right now in Tuscaloosa. I got the window open and the fan going. My hot-blooded nature loving this.
Big boy season. Get you one.
Exactly. Let's go. This one's taken. Sorry. Let's jump out to the hotline. And Joey, before we get started, man, I got to know, are you going to be hyped up enough to be able to do this? I mean, Joe Gaither wasn't in the production room.
I chanted in his ear on the phone call. Yeah.
Michael had you covered.
There wasn't that typical Joe flair, but you know what? It got the job done. I'm ready to go.
Let's go. Awesome. All right. Let's jump right into it with Alabama first. We're at this bye week. We're treating it kind of like a mid-season deal, especially when you play Mercer and Southern Miss. You had 2 kind of weak games, so basically mid-season anyway. But with all the talk that surrounds the team, and a lot of it being negative just because it doesn't stack up to last year's, even though it's an elite team, number 3 in the country, is there maybe in your mind a piece of this team that is playing better than we're giving it credit for?
I think the wide receivers are doing a lot better, and a lot of people are concerned with them. We actually talked about this last week about how many drops they've been having, and the receivers needing to pick up in that department. But if you look at stats, they're actually doing really well. I saw a stat the other day that Alabama actually had at this point last season, they actually had wide receivers actually had one more drop at this point in the season last year than they did this year, and that last year's team won a national championship. So if you look at those stats, it's like it's really not that concerning. It's just that I think one of the big concerns is that a lot of the drops that are happening are in wide open situations, and I think that draws attention to them, and so those plays stick out. So, but I think these wide receivers have, at least over the past couple of weeks, have gotten a lot better. I think another department that Alabama has really improved in over the course of the season is penalties. Gone are the days where they had double-digit penalties. Seemingly 3 or 4 games in a row. This past week against Tennessee, they were. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the stats real quick right here. I can't seem to find it. I always have problems.
I want to say it was 4 penalties for like 45 yards or something like that.
Yeah, 4 penalties for 30 yards. Yeah, finally just found it. So that's a dramatic improvement over how they were over the first couple of weeks of the season. So if I had to point to a couple of things that they've improved on, and they're continually getting better, and I would say those 2 departments right there are doing a great job.
I definitely agree on the penalty part. I brought that up as I was talking about the officiating, and we'll dive into that a little bit later too. But with that being said, because you didn't give the answer I thought you would, the defensive line, because that's I mean, the answer I thought you would was just my answer. So how arrogant of me. I do want to ask you about the defensive line though. What are your impressions on how they're playing, and you can include the edge rushing linebackers in that if you want to, but they got a lot of flack over the past couple of weeks because of the play of the off-ball linebackers. Those 2 guys had their best game of the season against Tennessee. So what do you make of kind of the way the defensive line is played? I mean, they've got number 18 back, and LeBron Ray's helped out a lot too, I think.
Yeah, I think they had a really quiet start to the season, but they have gotten a little bit better, but they still, they still aren't getting quite the penetration that we thought that we'd see this year. We thought that we'd see, LeBron Ray and DJ Dale, really penetrating and being able to get into defense, get into the offensive backfield. And that just really hasn't happened so far. I mean, if you look at the Tennessee game, LeBron Ray only had 1 tackle for loss. He actually had 2 tackles in general. DJ Dale had half a tackle for a loss. And there really needs to be some improvement on that defensive line if they're going to want to hang against Georgia and their offensive line. So that's still something to me. I know you said that you might think that they've improved, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done. I think they have been able to, contain an edge, but that's also because of the blitzing linebackers like Will Anderson and what they've been able to accomplish. So I think that, having players like Will Anderson really helps them out. But I think that overall there still needs to be a lot more pressure, against Tennessee and an offensive line that really isn't that stellar. I mean, there were only two sacks in the game for 14 yards, and I think both of those were. I think Williamson was involved in both of those plays. They weren't by defensive linemen, so definitely needs some work done there.
Well, Tennessee ran like 40 plays, so there weren't a lot of opportunities for sacks.
That's fair.
Okay, so flipping the coin, you kind of mentioned it there with the defensive line, but if you have another place to go, or maybe just an overall theme, because my answer to this was focus and consistency. What's the biggest thing you think the Crimson Tide needs to work on during this bye week?
I think it's just overall just continuous improvement, and that's something players have talked about. This past week we got to speak to Malachi Moore and Evan Neal. They're both talking about how just learning from the mistakes. They're still learning from the Texas A&M game and what went wrong there just a few weeks ago, and how they can improve. And I guess one thing that was encouraging after the Tennessee game is that you heard the players talk about how they were happy with the result, but they weren't done, which is actually in stark contrast to what Nick Saban was saying after the game. Nick Saban, that's one of the happiest I've ever seen him after a midseason win. He was in a very good mood, but the players were not quite as pumped. I mean, they were jazzed that they won, but at the same time, they said that they needed to learn from the mistakes. And I think only having 3 sacks was one of those things that they talked about. But if I were to pick a very specific thing for them to improve on, I think that's probably just the secondary needs work. I think that they blew several coverages that ended up being Tennessee's biggest plays of the game. There's blown coverages several times in that game, so that definitely needs some work. Defensive line, as I talked, also needs some work. But I think this offense is finally kind of clicking on all cylinders. I do think that the offensive line could be a little bit better. They still gave up 2 sacks against Tennessee, but I think there's still a lot of improvements to be made, but we are seeing them slowly but surely get better. And the next 2 games will be a good opportunity for them to improve before the Auburn game and before that, hopefully, the SEC title game.
Talking with Joey Blackwell at Blackwell Sports on the Twitter account, beat writer for Bama Central, the Sports Illustrated affiliate of the Alabama Crimson Tide. A lot of fans have a lot of strong opinions on the coordinators of this team. No blame towards Nick Saban. It's too close to his birthday around this time of year. We can't be mad at him. Let him have his carrot cake and enjoy it. But with Bill O'Brien and Pete Golding, for all the good that they can do, their negatives get shown on a lot by this fan base. So I'm just kind of curious, what are your thoughts on the 2 coordinators and the job they've done this year?
Well, you know what they say about an elephant never forgets. Well, elephant fans also never forget. And I think the problem there is that this defense. Let's start with Pete Golding. With Pete Golding, I think with him. Sorry, I'm kind of trying to gather my words here how I want to word this. With Pete Golding, I think I've mentioned this on the show before. The landscape of college football has changed dramatically. You're not going to hold teams to 10 points anymore in a single game. You're not going to hold them to 3 points. Offenses are way too good, and they're going to gain an average of 300 yards a game against your defense. That's just going to happen, and people need to get used to that. And when you have offenses that have evolved, defense has always been reactionary when it comes to how things evolve. The defense over the course of college football history has always had to evolve to match up with the offense. And today the offensive game is very effective, and I think it's trending towards the offensive side of the football. And I don't think that denotes anything negative against Pete Golding. He has made some questionable coverage calls. There's no doubt about it. I can't ignore that, but at the same time, I think that he has done a decent job, and I know a lot of people are going to roll their eyes at that, but I think he's done an okay job. I mean, people forget. I mean, this guy led a incredible defense last year to the national title game that held Justin Fields to very low numbers compared to what he normally does. I mean, but people don't forget those blown coverages, and people don't forget. How many yards in Tennessee? Yes, they had 346 yards, but they also, scored 24 points, and most of those points a couple of touchdowns came in the second half. So I think he's been pretty effective. I'm not really quite sure if you agree with me or not, but moving on to Bill O'Brien, that's kind of the subject of, Crimson Tide fans never forget. I think heading into Texas A&M game, Alabama fans were pretty happy with Bill O'Brien, but there were those plays inside the 10-yard line on multiple occasions where they just weren't effective. And, it was, I wouldn't call them the wrong play calls, but they weren't the best play calls for that situation. But, we saw the very next week that he had corrected those every time they were within the 10-yard line, they were running. So I think he learned from his mistakes, and Alabama fans should give him a second chance. I was very pleased with the play calling in the Tennessee game. There were only a couple of drives that Alabama went 3 and out where they weren't effective, but then after they got into the rhythm, they were very, very productive. So I think that the criticism for both Pete Golding and Bill O'Brien's a little harsh. Bill O'Brien more so, just because this is still Bill O'Brien's first year. It's his first year back into the college game after a while. So I think he should be given at least a little bit longer time to adjust to the college game after being in the NFL for such a lengthy period. But Pete Golding, I can understand, the anger a little bit more just because he has been with Alabama for several years now, and the defense hasn't been as effective as it was prior to him coming here. But at the same time, I think that's also just because of the changing landscape of college football. And hopefully in time, if Alabama wins another national championship this year, maybe that'll quiet the criticism a little bit.
Yeah, I tend to agree on both fronts. More so with the Bill O'Brien side. I think, I agree. I think Pete Golding has done an above average job, and especially in improving his defenses over time. The more talent he's gotten, the better he's done. That's just natural. Half his job is as a recruiter. I don't know if people know this or not, but according to On3 at least, Arch Manning, his primary recruiter is Pete Golding. So I wouldn't hate on the guy too much right now. But the one thing that does concern me is the production at linebacker and seeing those guys progress. We haven't seen a lot out of that, and I think that's a bigger tell. But I mean, I don't think he's doing a bad enough job to consistently ask a guy to be fired. I think we throw that word around too much. Fired.
Yeah, I agree. And with the linebackers, you also have to remember the linebackers are having to play thin this year. With Chris Allen being injured and Drew Sanders having being MIA the past several weeks with his injury that he's having to deal with. The linebackers are spread thin. Now, that excuse me, that's no excuse for Christian Harris and Henry To'oTo'o to not be playing up the standards. But at the same time, these linebackers do have extra responsibilities that they wouldn't have had Chris Allen and Drew Sanders not gotten hurt. So we have to throw them a bone in that respect. Now, missed tackles and not being near the play, like that's unforgivable. That's something that the players need to work on. But at the same time, they have gotten better. I mean, To'oTo'o did, at the halftime last week, To'oTo'o was leading the team in tackles, so he was being effective. I don't know if that's because he's improved or that's because he's just playing against his former teammate. But Christian Harris needs help as well. But we've seen him get better. I believe he had half a sack this past week, so he was able to get into the backfield. That goes back to what I said. Just continuous improvement is something that they need to focus on the bye week, learn from their mistakes, which I think they've done. This is the team we saw against Tennessee. While they struggled, in the first quarter, this team did actually finish the game, which is something that we haven't seen a lot this year. They were still holding Tennessee in the fourth quarter, and I think that moving from here, you have an LSU team that's definitely seen better years. You have a New Mexico State team. You have Auburn, and you also have Arkansas. So I think all four of those are winnable games, and they're not going to be easy games. And I think that's perfect because that's how you're going to see what your team is made of before you head into the postseason.
No doubt about it. And I think that's a big storyline for this team is, last year's team, they were ready to go from the jump. This one has had to learn and grow and evolve. And I think that's just as admirable as being the ultimate team to be the team that has to fight through all the adversity, doesn't get it done the same way most Alabama teams do. I only want to ask you about one specific player, and it's a difficult one because it's such an unknown situation. Nick Saban only gives so much information on what's going on. He does give you a little bit of hints and clues, and you can obviously see what this guy is doing on social media. And that's Agiye Hall. We all kind of know the situation. There's really no need to kind of continue to rehash it. But what are your thoughts on Agiye Hall, his stances, his arguments, that really just comes down a lot to his lack of playing time?
Yeah, when people bring up Agiye Hall, I tend to kind of quickly remind people of Brian Robinson or Devontae Smith or players that came in and didn't really have, Devontae Smith, of course, had the second 26 catch, but that entire season, he really didn't have a lot of playing time. Brian Robinson Jr., a guy that didn't start his first 4 years, and then all of a sudden, is the primary starter, and will probably go in the first 3 rounds or so of the NFL draft. He'll still end up being drafted. And once you get to that level, then it's up to you to be able to perform and show that you should have been drafted higher. I think with G.A. Hall, as a true freshman, I could understand if he was a junior and having this kind of frustration and not being able to play. But the kid's only been on campus for less than a year. This is still his first season. And I now, while he might be a great wide receiver, we haven't seen him that much. But while he might be a great wide receiver, you still have to, there's a certain aspect of the game that comes along with it, and quiet confidence and, understanding that, next man up, having that next man up mentality, and understanding that your number can be called at any time, and having that impatience, and posting the stuff that he's been posting on social media kind of shows a certain degree of immaturity. As far as, what he's currently up to, I don't know if he's still around. Obviously we haven't seen him on the field, but I think this is something that needs to be worked out. But at the same time, we've seen players transfer from Alabama that have done well. Look at Keelan Robinson. He's having a pretty decent season. You've seen some players that went to Texas that had, with Sarkisian that are doing well. Maybe Alabama's just not the best fit for him, and that happens. And, it's unfortunate because obviously you want to see every player that comes to Alabama do well. But sometimes, it's just not their puzzle piece, doesn't fit into the overall grand puzzle of Alabama football sometimes, and it's time for them to move on. So it'll be interesting to see how it unravels, over the next several weeks. If he enters the transfer portal, I haven't seen him into the portal yet, but there's clearly something going on, and hopefully he'll be able to figure it all out.
Absolutely. I mean, look at Cincinnati, who one of their best players is. It's Jerome Ford, Alabama guy.
Yeah.
So sometimes a change of scenery is exactly what you need. Talking with Joey Blackwell at Blackwell Sports, beat writer for Bama Central. We'll talk a little bit of basketball towards the end, so stick around with us here. Jacob Harrison off the edge. I want to take it to the SEC officiating. It's been a big topic of discussion, and more so off of the Tennessee Ole Miss game, but it still continues. And, Greg Sankey had a little bit to say about how, full-time refs isn't the be-all, end-all solution to the problem. And I tend to agree with that. But, there's a lot of varying opinions on officiating in college football and professional football and all sports. It's never going to be satisfactory. But what do you think are some of the things that the SEC can do to kind of quell this problem and make it just a little bit more enjoyable to watch football without so much yellow?
Well, I think that one thing that I would like to see more is more transparency, and the SEC has taken steps to do that. A couple of years ago, they started the SEC officiating Twitter account, which as soon as that was announced, I remember our good friend Cecil Hurt at Tuscaloosa News tweeting out that it was like, rip your mention, because we all knew that was going to backfire. But at the same time, it did show a degree of transparency, because I haven't kept up with it, but I know that those first couple of seasons, every time there was a question or play call, they would tweet out their reasoning behind the call, and stuff like that. But I would still like to see more transparency. And this is probably going to sound a little bit cheesy on my end, but one of the things that the XFL did really well, that was also from the league that the Birmingham Iron was in. I forget the league that was called.
The Alliance.
Right, the Alliance. I really liked how when they had plays under review, you could actually hear what the officials were talking about and hear them talking through the calls. I thought that was a really cool feature that they had when they were reviewing plays, because you got to kind of get a behind the scenes peek. You got to see what the people, in Birmingham were talking. Well, it was the SEC. You get to hear what the people in the office in Birmingham were saying, the people up in the booth and the people on the field, and what they were debating. I really like that. I know that's probably something that will never happen at the college football level, especially for Power 5. That's just that's a huge thing or undertaking. But that kind of goes to, I just really would like to see more transparency and the logic behind making certain calls. I don't think that they should go as far as the NFL, and make pass interference a reviewable penalty. I think that's a little bit too far. But as far as hiring refs, I think that the current system is fine. I don't think hiring full-time refs would necessarily work out very well. I mean, it's still college football. This isn't the NFL, and there are certain, if you have full-time refs, that's probably going to even hit towards more bias, because guess what? Those refs, their paychecks are coming from the conference. So do you really want, a certain, conference officials to be covering a certain game, between a non-conference opponent and a conference opponent? I don't know if that would necessarily work out very well. So there's just a lot of factors to consider. Yes, there are too many flags being thrown. Maybe some more referee, kind of training could be put into effect. But they do that stuff every year, and these guys are at the top of their game, and that's why they're calling these games. They do put in a lot of work to make it to what to where they are. And while yes, we all roll our eyes, it doesn't matter. You can do everything that you possibly want, and they could follow it to a T. But at the same time, there are always going to be calls in college football to make you roll your eyes.
Absolutely, it's never going to be satisfactory. You can never add enough salt and pepper to this one. It's always going to be bland and make you want to spit it out.
If that same call was called on the other opponent, then you wouldn't have a problem with it.
Exactly. I think it comes down to that a lot of times. We can't get out of the way of our own biases sometimes. It's hilarious. Let's take a trip around the world of college football real quick. Just a couple of games, and really they're both in the SEC because they both matter quite a bit. The one that might not have the most surprising outcome could still it can have a lot of ramifications, because if Florida's sitting at 4-4 at this point in the season, they've got to seriously consider their future with Dan Mullen a little bit. And if Anthony Richardson doesn't play a lot in this game, then he's got to consider his future. But we also want to see Georgia's offense go up against a good defense. Now, while Florida hasn't been playing as good as probably they can, and certainly not as good as they did against Alabama, it will be the best defense that Georgia's played since week 1. So what do you make of the Georgia-Florida game this weekend in Jacksonville?
Well, I think one of the key things is going to be a turnover battle, and I think that's something that Florida's simply not going to win. I think it's going to be an intense, hard-hitting battle. If Georgia is going to be playing an even keel and not getting caught up, in the rivalry itself. For Florida, I think they need to get caught up in the rivalry and they need to play intense. But I think Georgia needs to be about being level-headed in this game. That means a lot to them. But the Georgia run defense is really, really fantastic, and I think that's going to be a key difference. I think that's going to be why Florida loses the turnover battle. Definitely picking Georgia in this game. I think Florida does fall to 4-4 on the year. I don't think Dan Mullen will get fired right away, but I do think that there will definitely, if this trend continues with Florida after they're such a solid start, then I think there do need to be some questions around his hiring down there.
No doubt about it. I mean, I like Dan Mullen, but it seems more and more every single day that he might be more cut out for the NFL. And there's going to be a lot of teams looking for new head coaches next year in the NFL. There's a handful of really bad teams up there. So
he's also really cut out for cosplay. He dressed up for Darth Vader. I'd like to see more of those.
He's got to work on his craftsmanship, though. I mean, that Darth Vader mask was crooked. Like, I love the gimmick, but come on, commit to the bit. Commit to it.
A for effort, though. You got an A for effort.
A for effort, yeah. Auburn and Ole Miss. Now, this one can really impact Alabama. Now, I joked with Ryan Fowler the other day. If you're rooting for Auburn, you're scared of Auburn. You're okay with losing to Auburn, because an Auburn win here would make things a little bit less stressful on Alabama as far as the path to Atlanta. Because if Ole Miss wins out and Alabama drops a game in the regular season, that's all she wrote. Ole Miss is going to Atlanta. But with this game, I mean, both of these teams, I don't recommend anybody bet on this game, because both these teams, have a history of being very inconsistent. While Matt Corral has played very efficient football, he played really efficiently against Alabama, and it didn't matter. And Auburn brings a good defense. Bo Nix, if he's good Bo Nix, and good Bo Nix has been on the road this year, they've got a real shot. This is going to be a very exciting game for the SEC right here.
Yeah, it's going to be yet another game that Ole Miss is in where I think it's going to come down to the wire. It's going to be a really close game. I think running the ball is the secret to Auburn in this game. I think that's what they're about to do. I think they're going to their ground game has a lot of talent in the backfield. The offensive line hasn't been too bad for them. But I think that against Ole Miss, they're going to have a really good day. The Ole Miss run defense did step up against LSU, but that was also LSU we're talking about here. And this is a really solid Auburn team. I think they should line up, run the ball again. Let Bo Nix make a few key completions and then kind of hold on. And I think that's what's going to happen. I have Auburn winning, but I think it's going to be a very, very narrow margin of victory for them, kind of how we've seen, with Ole Miss pull off over the past several weeks.
I got to stick with Ole Miss. That was my preseason prediction. They'd go 11-1, and they're on the way. So I got to stick with them. But Lane Kiffin.
This is really a coin flip. It really could, by the way, and it's definitely going to be one of those games that I have on. It's glorious bye week I'm going to have on TV.
No traveling for the Blackwell. No, but I mean, Lane Kiffin. I mean, he's got to be in the back of his head thinking, I really need the ball last in this game, because the last few games, I mean, I think you're exactly right. It comes down to the wire, but in each of those games, Arkansas, Tennessee, his team didn't have the ball last, and you could read the stress on his face. I wish Matt Corral had the ball right now. So I think that may be something that he's got to be thinking about as they head into the fourth quarter of that one. All right, in the NFL. We both, were the guys that wrote this story for our publications. Mark Ingram, man, he's traded back to New Orleans. 10th year in the league, I think, if I'm doing my math correct, maybe 11th. What do you think Mark Ingram brings to New Orleans now at this stage? I mean, is a little bit weak there in Houston, but he had to split the backfield with two other guys who are also aging. Really strange decisions there from Houston, but he looked good in Baltimore, and they just had to cut him loose because of the money and his age. How do you think it fits back well for Mark Ingram, who's probably going to have to wear 28, by the way?
Well, with Tony Jones Jr. being placed on the IR with an ankle injury, for the Saints, I think that Ingram will immediately be slotted, kind of as a second back, obviously behind Alvin Kamara, who's having another really great year for them. I really like this trade, and when Mark Ingram first left New Orleans, I was kind of disappointed just because I really liked him being kind of their franchise running back there. Alvin Kamara is obviously taking up that lead now, and rightfully so. But I was really hoping over the years that he's been away, 2 seasons with Baltimore and 1 with Houston, I was really hoping that he'd eventually find his way back. So I'd like to see him retire in New Orleans. And it looks like he might just do that over the next couple of years. But I really like this trade. I really like Mark Ingram heading back to New Orleans. He's well loved by Saints fans. I had a friend yesterday who's a huge Saints fan. As soon as it happened, he actually texted me before I even knew that the trade had happened, and was like, "Dude, Mark Ingram back to New Orleans." And I'm really excited for him. And playing with players that he's already played with, like Alvin Kamara, who's his teammate at both Alabama for a brief time. And in New Orleans, I'm just really happy for the guy. Mark Ingram's always been a really nice guy, really fun guy to be around, and just seeing him back, in a place that he's comfortable and a place that he really likes, and the fans really like him as well. It does my heart good. I'm glad to see him down there.
Speaking of nice guys and guys that are fun to be around, Nate Oates has got a basketball team this year, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, he does. This non-conference schedule might make a few people wince, but Nate Oates is geared up for it, man, and he's got a squad that can really that I think, honestly, I think a lot of people look at that non-conference schedule and they're like, we're probably going to get it handed to us a couple of times. Maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid a little too much, but I think this team could surprise a lot of people and be a little bit more effective in their non-conference schedule than they were last year. I know the struggles last year built the team into what it became, but there's no reason to just lie over and hope for the best. I think Nate Oates is attacking this thing head on. Give us a little bit of a preview for the basketball team after their first exhibition the other night against Louisiana.
Well, it was a solid exhibition. Nate Oates even said himself after the game that the game came down to the wire in the final couple of minutes. Then Jade Davidson stood up and scored 6 points to give Alabama the win. And I think that this is a game, like Nate Oates said, that they would have lost early on last year, but this year they were able to pull through. And this is a game that also we didn't see Javon Quinterly. Javon Quinterly didn't play him on the court. You had and I think that And I think that they're really going to be effective this year. In a game where your leading scorer, Jaden Shackelford, only scores 6 points and you're still able to win the game and you don't Javon Quinley, I think that says a lot to the depth on this team. I think that Keon Ellis is going to be a showstopper. I think that people are really going to see what he's been able to do. When the media and the coaches both picked Javon Quinley and Jaden Shackelford to be first team at All SEC, and then both times both players tweeted out that Keon Ellis had gotten snubbed. I think that says a lot to him. And he led Alabama in scoring at 21 points, and he had 4 rebounds and 3 assists against Louisiana. I think he's a senior, but I think he's going to have a breakout year. I think this is the year that people like, holy crap, Keon Ellis, he's going to do a great job. But then you also have J.D. Davison having a great debut as a true freshman. He was second on the team in points with 19. But one of the biggest things, I asked Oates this after the game, talking about how their free throw shooting, and if that was a point of emphasis this season after the way that they lost to UCLA in the Sweet 16. Alabama was, I believe, they were 27 of 33 from the free throw line. And the only player that really struggled from the line was Charles Bediako, who's 3 of 7. And so I think that if you remove Charles Bediako from the equation, they're 27 of I believe 26 from the free throw line. So I think this is something that they've really improved on. They struggled with the free throws last year, heading late into the season, that ultimately climaxed there in UCLA in the Sweet 16. But I think that they've really worked on their free throw shooting. The one thing that they need to work on is their 3-point game. That was something that they really was not effective against Louisiana, but they were still able to score 73 points on their fast break offense. So I really like this Alabama basketball team. I've been riding high. I was kind of surprised to see that them being picked to finish second in the conference. I think that's very well deserved. Don't get me wrong, but I thought people were going to pick them lower. But seeing how much confidence everybody has in this Alabama team, they're going to ride it through. It is going to be a very difficult non-conference schedule. They have 3 of last year's Final Four teams on their schedule, so it's going to be difficult. But at the same time, I think this is a team that could win at least 2 of those 3 games. I think they're going to get some big, quadrant 1 victories, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it takes them.
Absolutely. Another big season for Nate Oates to show why this is a championship school, not just a football school. Very excited to see how it unfolds. At Blackwell Sports on the Twitter account, that's where you can find Joey and keep up with his latest work at BamaCentral.com, the Sports Illustrated affiliate of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Joey, man, we appreciate it. Enjoy the bye week and watch a lot of football, my friend.
Absolutely, will do. Thank you, Jacob.
Absolutely. Joey Blackwell helping us out. We'll take a quick break. We can squeeze in a phone call if you got time. 205-342-9904 here on Off the Edge. Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide sports.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe a bit porky, and you may even have type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term insurance may only cost you about $200 a month. Call Term Provider. Speak with Big Lou at 800-777-1225. Big Lou will find a term life policy for you even if you have type 2 diabetes, are overweight, or have high blood pressure. Term Provider has helped thousands of people like you who think they can't afford term life insurance. To buy $1 million of affordable term life for you, all you need to do is call Big Lou at 800-777-1225. Lou will make sure the scales are tipped in your favor. Call 800-777-1225. Big Lou will answer your call and work to fit you into a term life policy that you can afford. Remember, Big Lou's like you. He's on meds, too. Call 800-777-1225. 800-777-1225.
I struggled with symptoms like frequent gas and stomach pain for years.
I was bloated all the time with daily diarrhea.
At first, I thought it was what I was eating.
I kept thinking it was stomach issues.
So I did my research and talked to my doctor, and we finally uncovered the truth.
It was actually EPI. Exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI, is a condition where your pancreas is unable to help break down your food.
It can lead to symptoms like diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, unexplained weight loss, and oily stools.
And EPI symptoms can be confused with those of other common digestive conditions, like irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's, and celiac disease.
So getting to the right diagnosis meant being more open with my doctor about the severity of my symptoms and how often they were happening.
But there's good news. EPI is manageable, so don't wait any longer. Use the symptom checker at identifyepi.com and schedule a visit or call with your doctor to ask, could I have EPI?
Sponsored by AbbVie.
This is a metaphor for your business's journey. Sometimes it feels like the course keeps changing right before your eyes. And in order to maneuver it, you need an expert by your side. That's what Dell Technologies advisors do. They have the Windows PC and tech solutions you need to help you get out in front and stay ahead of the game. Call an advisor today at 877-ASK-DELL. That's 877-ASK-DELL. A start to a simpler experience with Windows 11 Pro.
Don't miss a play at the Sportsbook at Pearl River Resort. Your front row seat to all the action. Place bets on all professional and most college sports at the counter, kiosk, or on your phone. Then catch the game on one of our 20 big screens from the comfort of the newly remodeled Timeout Lounge. Plus, the PRR Sports app gives you access to live, in-play sports betting. Sportsbook at Pearl River Resort. Be more than a fan. Be a player. Must be 21.
Don't miss the grand reopening of Tuscaloosa Locksmith and Gunsmith's new location this Saturday from 10 till 2 with food and door prizes. Located at 1605 23rd Avenue, Tuscaloosa.
In a collision, easy decision. One name, one firm, one call. Ms. Reno.
I made that one call to Mesrano after being hit by an 18-wheeler. He got me $875,000.
I made that one call to Mesrano after being T-boned on McFarland. He got me $125,000.
I made that one call to Mesrano after my fender bender. He got me $50,000.
One name, one call, one firm. Ms. Reno.
No representation made that quality legal services to be performed is greater than quality legal services performed by other lawyers.
Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
Mostly cloudy, windy, noticeably cooler today. Some light rain at times this afternoon, the high at 65. Even colder tonight and tomorrow, mostly cloudy, periods of light rain. Tonight's low 48, the high tomorrow only in the middle 50s at 55. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 67 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
You're listening to Off the Edge on Tide 100.9.
Back here on Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports. Had a fun conversation there with Joey Blackwell. If you missed any of it, Podcast Center, Tide109.com, as well as the Tide 100.9 app. You can catch the entire replay of the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. Let's jump out to the hotline. Welcome in our friend Jim from Tennessee. What's going on, Jim?
How's it going? At this
Oh, good.
It's okay. But I just want to say there's a website I found the other day. It's called CFBAlmanac.com. You ever heard of it?
I think I've heard of it in passing, yes.
Yeah, it's a history of college football. They have different stuff. They have small schools, FCS and FBS. It's got the FBS has more pages on it. It's got each school has a page, and it's got the national champions and Heisman Trophy winners such as that, the NFL picks, top draft picks, and all that. Well, they've got a page on there. It's called NCAA Infractions History. It's got every school on there. It's Division I FBS school that's been had major infractions. Some of them had zero, of course, but it had every major infraction. Do you know who the school that had the most major infractions in college football history? Who do you think that'd be? You had to guess.
I'm not gonna lie, that's a tough one to think of off the top of my head. My gut wants to say Auburn, but I think that's my bias.
It's not a major school. It's not Auburn.
Oh, it's not a major school. Okay, well then I would have no idea, Jim.
It's not a Power 5 school. It's not like SEC racing. It's Southern Methodist University, Dallas, Texas.
Okay, no, see, now I feel like an idiot.
eight times. The first time in the late 50s they were called, and 3 times in the 80s.
Yeah.
They had the death penalty, and 2
Yeah.
times. Okay, and also just one real quick thing: the Power 5 conference in history with major violations in college football. The number 1 conference, 13 of the 14 members had major violations 47 times. That's the Southeastern Conference. It means more, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Southeastern cheaters, as we call them.
There we
the
go.
Leaders in that clubhouse: Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, 5 times. 4 times Florida, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas A&M. 3 times Kentucky, my Wildcats. We know we ain't peers of driven snow. Tennessee, Missouri, and South Carolina. But 3 times in those schools. And the other conferences, real quick, the Pac-12, all their members have been called 35 times. The Big 12, 10 of their members, all 10 of their members have 32 violations. The Big 10, 10 of their 14 members have 26 violations. And the ACC, 10 of their 14 have 25. There's been 9 schools that have never been called major violations in college football. One of them's Vanderbilt, the SEC. The other eight, real quick, ACC 4, Boston College, Duke, Wake Forest, Louisville. And the Big 10 4, Purdue, Northwestern, Iowa, Penn State. Let's expand the playoff. Let's have them 8 in. You want to? We'll have Duke and Northwestern, a quarterfinal. Boston College, Penn State, a quarterfinal. Let's have that. We don't need the SEC school. We don't need no these cheaters. Let's let them in there, Dave. See what happens. Duke versus What's your comments on?
Well, I thought
and also Oklahoma had six violations, and Southern Cal had 6. So they're second. So y'all hang in. Have a good one. See y'all.
Absolutely, Jim. Take it easy. I thought his point to all that was going to be that Kentucky had no violations. But I will say we learned a little something there. And I feel like an idiot for not knowing the answer was SMU. I guess I got set up there. Isn't SMU a Power 5 school now, or Power 6? Aren't they joining the American? Or excuse me, no, they're in the American. That's a Power 6 school. That's it. That's what it is. They count. They're a power school in some universes. Maybe not this one. Always love it when Jim chimes in. We'll see you tomorrow for Off the Edge here at 11 a.m. The Jay Barker Show is up next, followed by Ryan Fowler. We'll probably get you some good content in between Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show tonight as well. Check us out tomorrow. Everybody have a good Thursday. Roll Tide.
Thank you for listening to Off the Edge.
Can't tell you how proud I am of our players, our team.
Join us every Monday from 8 to 10 and Friday from 7 to 9 p.m. on Tide 100.9 and the Tide 100.9 app.